Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to episode 51 of Energy Speaks Back, powered by Hark Systems. Weekly, I present to you experts from around the world, and today we are in Silicon Valley. Our purpose, as always, is to provide a good understanding of energy management knowledge from around the world, which is available today for us to deliver savings to impact on our planet. Energy Speaks Back is a platform I use to provide knowledge to other energy experts around the world. And it would not be worthy if we did not have our amazing guests. In addition, we have partners, and again, these are key because we need to raise the profile of great technologies and services. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to our partners and our sponsors. So as you know, we are powered by Hark Systems, who are renowned for their energy software, EcoSync, regarding their heating technologies, which are initiatives coming from Oxford University. We have Alexis Energy, which is power management in Australia, and they're looking to take that technology across the world. We have LED Vision, who have developed LED lighting, but more importantly, they've developed controls and systems around the LEDs that can provide significantly more savings. We have Simot, who are driving the EV transition, and then we have Black Carbon leading the way regarding waste to energy. So that brings me back to today. My guest today is an environmental engineer, a designer, a developer in gamification and behavior design for the planet. She is a TEDx speaker, and lastly, the co-founder of Energy Lollipop, which you'll be hearing more throughout this podcast. So without any further ado, I give you Katie Patrick. Good morning, Katie. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. And I say good morning, it's actually good afternoon and evening in the UK. And I've got beautiful evening here. What sort of weather have you woken up to in the where you are today?
Well, I live in Silicon Valley in California, and it's warm and sunny all the time, except today where it's actually overcast. So it's rare. There's a little bit of cloud in the sky.
Right. Do you think that's a little bit of a hint of climate change or not?
No, I don't think we need to cherry pick every single weather event as climate change. I mean, weather happens with or without climate change. Weather happens, and climate change just makes it a tiny bit worse.
Right. So, Casey, I've been following you through your YouTube channel, and I've seen your TED Talk, which was absolutely awesome. Can you give some background to yourself for our listeners today?
Yeah, I'll just sort of ramble and try and get it into a nutshell. Well, I was actually born in the United States, but I grew up in Australia, and I grew up in a very creative designer household where my family were German immigrants. So my grandfather was a graphic designer and my grandmother was a fashion designer. So I was immersed in these very advanced illustration. So my grandfather was the guy who actually had to paint the billboards. This was before Photoshop, before computers. You had to draw every single font by hand.
Right.
And my grandmother was constantly doing fashion illustrations, and they taught me that. So my entire childhood was based on technical visual craftsmanship. And I just kind of took that for granted, that was just what life was. But then in my teens, I became very interested in science, and I happened to be kind of good at math. Or maths. Now we can say maths now we're UK. People have learned to speak American after living here for 10 years. Became deeply interested in environment and science. But then as I started to work as a green building engineer, and was really trying to do, sustainability work professionally, this childhood that I had that was so rich with art and design was always kind of bubbling up. I was always thinking, we have to redesign this. Well, that software looks terrible. Let me redesign it. Why is that magazine looking like that? We've got to redesign that. So I had this intense drive to want to visually redesign everything that was happening in sustainability, which led me to ending up starting a media company where I produced a magazine in Australia called The Green Pages, which was quite successful. And it was one of the first times, this was in the early 2000s, that sustainability looked really cool and sexy and fashionable and professionally produced. Before that time, It was really dorky, really backwards. It was, wearing Birkenstocks and eating falafels and lentils and, really kind of awful, creepy vegetarian restaurants. And, professional sustainability was, just like some dorky air pollution engineers. It really had not become mainstream or
exactly what you're
fashionabilized.
saying there. I know exactly.
And there was a cusp that happened at around 2005 where myself and a few other people around the world was like, we don't want it to be this way anymore. We want to create a cultural revolution. We don't want to be seen as this weird sort of flea-bitten fringe. I wanted sustainability to be better than Nike, to be better than Chanel, to be on the front cover of Vogue. And that has happened now. But at the time, 15 years ago, that was a pretty revolutionary way to think about sustainability. And so I put all of my 20s really into trying to do that, to try and rebrand sustainability, to make it desirable and aspirational. And that was fun. It was successful. But anyway, then during the recession, that company died. So I moved to Silicon Valley, and everything was all apps and startups then. So totally dove right into the whole Silicon Valley startup scene, lived in hacker houses, learned how to write code. And then as I was trying to figure out, what would the next environmental save the earth startup be, I realized that there was this enormous gap of us being able to get real-time data. I wanted to get the kilowatt hours I was using in my house. And I was like, wow, there's absolutely no way to get the kilowatt hours. Even if there is a smart meter installed, you still can't access the real-time data. And a lot of times there isn't a smart meter. I could not get the amount of water I was using. What about the forest cover of or the green cover of my particular city? I can't get that. I can sort of get it through satellite or flyover imagery, but not very easily, not through an API that I can program and do a request for and get the data from. And air pollution, no, just one for the city. And I was like, oh my God, like the environmental movement, and this is energy as well, is so far behind Silicon Valley in terms of us getting the data about the earth, about our impact on the earth, and making good, robust APIs that computer programmers can call, and we can create interfaces for people to help them to actually take action. Like, it's missing. And then I just had this huge lightning bolt epiphany moment where I was like, this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. I want to be like building this cybernetic earth infrastructure, getting data from the planet, making it easy to use, showing real-time feedback loops of data. And that's when I wrote the book about it. So I wrote the book, How to Save the World, which was all of the theories about why we need better data and how we can use it in behavior design. And that's the type of work I do. I have a couple of startups doing this, one in energy called Energy Lollipop, which is showing the real-time CO2 emissions. So this is for an energy podcast, so not kilowatt hours.
No,
never ever communicate in kilowatt hours. Yep. Never kilowatt hours and never money, just CO2. Show the CO2 intensity and use that as the primary metric, and using it in real time and using it in color. That's basically it. That's the recipe. And another one also looking at urban heat islands, getting satellite data and showing, where the hotspots are in city to approach for cooling. And I do freelance consulting and design work about how to present data in a way that actually gets people to change, that gets the change to happen at the end of the day, which is the bit that we're all working towards.
Some of the things obviously on your TED Talk really inspired me when you talk about your childhood. Obviously, you talk about your creativity with your mum teaching you lots of things, but you told a story about you saved all your pocket money up to buy a Greenpeace mug, even right back then, which is really a lovely story. There was another story when you was going along and you wanted to put certain plants and flowers over some chimney stacks or properties.
Yeah, I felt so shy and silly about adding those things to the TED Talk because, you grow up and, I studied like engineering and I had a job in commercial property, on like $300 million projects. And everybody's trying to be very like professional and, serious. And then I was, I actually hired a coach to help me put the TED Talk together. And then she said, Katie, you have to, what were these pivotal moments in your life when you started to really care? Like in your childhood, like what were these, like that one thing where life was different since you thought of it? And I was like, well, when I was like a child, I used to look at all this like ugly urban stuff like train tracks and cities, and I would just be like, why did they build it this way? It's so ugly. Can't we just cover it with flowers? And in a way, like I've ever since being a child, and I could see this urban grime and I could, in my mind, I could reimagine it covered in flowers since being like 5 years old. I mean, it never went away. Like every time I see urban grime since then, I reimagine it covered with trees and flowers and moss and green walls and art. And it's never left me. It's like a permanent fixture in my imagination. And so she told me that I absolutely must add that to the TED Talk. So I was actually very, very shy about sharing that. But now, obviously, she's right. She's the expert. It's the thing that everybody loves and they all connect with. And it's a really touching moment.
It's what I would call the origin story. It's your origin story, and I think that's perfect.
Yeah, and I like the Greenpeace mug. Sorry,
I like the point you was talking about energy. So let me talk about energy. So energy wasn't trendy. Energy managers used to wear sandals with white socks. Maybe they used to wear like check jackets with leather pads on, just because they're so old they've worn their elbows through them, so they've now got leather pads on it. That is how the energy manager used to look. Energy management, the environment, it's all become more trendy now, hasn't it? As you said, we have seen massive step changes.
Well, I'm not sure if energy management has become fashionable, because I'm not always hanging out with those guys, so I have not inspected their outfits and seen if they're now wearing the latest like hipster, shoes and stuff. I mean, but just overall, I mean, energy is an enormous part of the whole climate change and sustainability pie of things to focus on. And, a lot of people are looking, to find an angle, to find out how to have impact. And so, there's a lot of movement with startups and software and trying to make change happen. I mean, but however, I think, there's one thing that I see happening is there's a lot of people who are, maybe want to do something really interesting, have an impact and build a startup. But then they realize when they actually want to really do something, that especially when it comes to energy, that there's a lot of like unglamorous heavy lifting that the industry has been doing already, like fixing the air conditioning ducts and putting in insulation and trying to convince somebody that they should get, solar panels. Or if they want to get an electric car, that they have to get an electrician to install the charger to get the right volts. And I think a lot of people stumble on the unglamorous reality of fixing up properties, residential or commercial, and the policy and the utilities, that it will always be gritty and unglamorous. And so I kind of think all the people that have been doing it all these years, like, it's really cool that they've been there, like sort of changing the fans over and fixing the buildings, the building management system and all that. So I don't know, they're the ones who are actually like doing it for real. So I personally think no matter where there's like white socks and sandals and what they're wearing, that I got a lot of respect for anybody who actually does it, rather than all like the hipster scene in San Francisco that wants to do it, but they're never going to rip out an air conditioning duct. They're way too cool for that. So they don't end up making the impact.
Well, I've been in the industry now coming into 41 years now. So I've actually seen those transitions. Obviously, I was younger when I was in the beginning of those, when it wasn't so hip to be an energy manager. But I started out in nuclear power, which was clean energy, but we all know it wasn't very clean long term because of the waste it generates. But it doesn't create all the smoke and all the grime around. So tell me more. So how many people are using your app, Lollipop?
Well, it's fairly new. Yeah, well, it's only just for California right now. So it's still like an early kind of prototype stage. So Energy Lollipop, currently the thing that you can download, we get the carbon emissions from the California grid, which is from the California ISO, and most states or cities, countries will have some sort of like data feed of their real-time emissions. But the problem is that the emissions are often like tucked somewhere in the website. You can't really see them. There's not a sense of usability. So I created Energy Lollipop to primarily signify just emissions. Its only purpose is to reduce emissions, and show it with a color. Just bring literacy to the number and the number of kilotons of CO2 that are coming out in real time, and bring a color to it. And once you've got color there, Like you can easily be, oh, it's a red time, it's an orange time, it's a yellow time, it's a green time, it's a blue time.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just instantly obvious because color is the most unconscious way to recognize it. And the current California ISO does not do that. It's just like a black kind of squiggly line. And you can't really tell whether the squiggly line is like high or low or kind of where it is. And so you can just click on it and it's just always updating in real time. And the idea is that can kind of like spearhead the agency of people to all work together in whatever respective ways we can do to just get rid of all that CO2. So it leads into naturally demand response. You immediately see the giant spike that happens in the evening. That's the biggest thing. We're like, oh my God, electricity is so dirty at dinner time. And it immediately shows you that in California, it's completely clean during the day. Like we have so much solar. California is basically entirely solar powered during the day, unless it's like an extreme heat wave and the peaker plants are on. So you immediately see that how important it is to charge your car or whatever you're doing, charge your electric vehicle in the daytime instead of in the nighttime. And then it leads you to the next question, which is, where is all this power coming from? And then bingo, where does it come from? 74 gas power stations. And so I looked up every single one of these gas power stations and I started to understand, what would it take to actually close every single one of these gas power stations. And we all know now that they also leak methane. So it's not just the CO2 that's coming from the electricity, it's also the whole methane extraction sort of leaking process as well. Yeah. So it's kind of like a master spearhead of how do we this is our master. In my book, I call it the God metric. What is your God metric? The God metric is CO2, net kilotons of CO2 per hour in real time. How do we get it down? Let's go.
And currently you're saying this is only operating in the California area. Have you got any vision to extend that out to across the States and maybe the world?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's just that we're just getting traction. It's starting things small, trying to build up an audience, trying to build up a movement. The next step, and it's the feature everybody asks for, is that it can adjust to being, showing the emissions anywhere in the world. But actually something that's going to be exciting either today or tomorrow, I'm actually going to the Oakland dock to pick up a big outdoor light. So it's going to be the Energy Lollipop outdoor light circle that will actually be able to sit outside, weatherproofed, Wi-Fi connected. And it will be, from what I can understand, the world's first real-time carbon display for outdoors on the street. So you could put it in a town square and you could walk by it and you could be like, oh, that's how much CO2 the grid is putting out right now. Oh, wow, it's really low right now. It's really high right now. Right. And I have not ever seen that done before. I've never seen anyone communicate real-time CO2 emissions on a digital screen in a public place. It'll be the first one. And so I'm looking forward to seeing it. I got to unpack it from its box from the ship tomorrow.
Excellent. And tell us about you've got 2 books, haven't you? You've got another book about the different ways that you can impact on making savings.
Well, my main book is called How to Save the World, which is a 10-step design process of how to make measurable change for any environmental change project using behavioral psychology and gamification. So it draws on a great deal of academic studies on how you actually get people to change. Like, for example, it's like using color. If red is bad, green is good. That's a really great way to signal to people to change their behavior. It's using comparison. Oh, you use 22% more energy than your neighbors. That's enormously powerful way to get through to people. Using smiley faces and frowny faces. Really simple, but honestly, if you give people a smiley face and say good job, or a frowny face saying, do better next time, it goes right into the core of the human psyche. We are hugely responsive to smiley faces and frowny faces. Exactly. It sounds silly, but it's like it's going to get right in there. So using on your promises,
YouTube, on your YouTube, there was a. I thought you was talking about another book, which is about 90 tips to make savings or to change.
That's the other one. That's not about energy though. That's about using waste. So my book, How to Save the World, is really it's the big fancy one. It's got a lot of studies and a lot of you can learn a lot from it.
But I was intrigued about all these 90 things that you've come up with as ways to make a difference.
Well, it's actually 148 things in 90 days. It's trash your life in 90 days. And that's just an ebook, so it's only on Kindle.
Right.
But it's still really popular though. People really love it. It's 148 ways to get rid of any waste out of your life. So it's a complete manual to zero waste living, which is everything from like using a bamboo toothbrush to, don't buy plastic toys for your kids. You can get these cubby houses that are made from cardboard, instead of buying like the plastic, house, to making your own cosmetics and sunscreen products, like every single thing. And when I fleshed them all out, there was actually 148 of them all up. So you go through sequentially every single one and then practice your behavior, so you're one of those people who just doesn't take the trash out anymore because you don't make any trash.
That's amazing. And how many people do you think are going to adopt those ways? Have you got any feeling for the sort of that approach? How many people can actually get onto that in the world? How many people do you think, as a percentage, would go, well, we need to do that?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know in terms of a percentage, but it's surprisingly popular. I mean, I started a YouTube channel teaching these tips, and I wrote this book, and I ended up stopping doing that project because I just got inspired by other things.
Yeah.
And but it was really popular. I mean, people really want to know like how to make their own toothpaste and how to make their own deodorant, and love the idea of making less waste. I think people feel a very strong sense of like agency, like they're able to do something when it comes to their own behaviors. It's probably one of the most rewarding environmentally friendly behaviors you can get. And there's something also very appealing about it, I think, when all of the waste and the stuff that we get, even if it's just like food packaging, it brings all this clutter into our environment, where our environments are so cluttered with like advertising and social media. And then you look into your cupboard and then there's just like all this clashing colors and fonts and packaging. And the zero waste dream sells you this thing that we're going to declutter everything. Everything will be in nice matching mason jars. Your fridge will be all tidy and organized. There'll be no plastic trash. Everything will be like clean and trashless. And I think that's like really appealing, really kind of deeply emotionally appealing to people. So there's definitely like a big hunger for people to want to like just get rid of all of the junk and live this sort of cleaner zero waste life. I'm going to actually revive that book probably in the next 6 months and do some new photography and put it out there.
Yeah,
out there again.
There was some good points on there, and yeah, in my notes it was it is the de-trash your life in 90 days. That's basically what it is, isn't it?
It is. I'm going to rebrand it as Zero Wasteify. What I'm hoping to do is build it into an app. It was actually an idea that I had to build a game, but then building a game was like sort of expensive, and I didn't know how to build a game, and I would have had to have hired people, and I wasn't quite sure how to do that at that time. So I just made an ebook because that was easier. But I still do want to actually put it together in like a sort of a behavior change app. So now I've had a few more years of practice under my belt and build up more of an audience. I might be able to sort of have the resources to do that now.
So all the governments around the world are all heading towards this 2050 target line of net zero. What's your thoughts on that? Is that you've got any? Are you inspired by that for the governments trying to drive us to get to those dates, and do you think we can get to those deadlines?
Well, the thing is with all these big deadlines is that, people like Greta Thunberg will complain about them and say that they're too far away and they're not ambitious enough. But if you just do the simple arithmetic, this is what I find really overwhelming about the challenge, is that if you do the simple arithmetic of reaching a zero carbon or net zero or real zero, in 30 years, 10 years, 20 years, you look at how many cars you have to switch over to EV, how many houses you need to actually go and take the natural gas pipes out of, how many solar panels need to be installed. Like it becomes an overwhelming number. It's a multiple. It's not just increasing it by 50 or 100%. Often you're talking about 1,000% increase. Instead of selling maybe like 200 cars a week, however many cars we sell in California, that needs to go up to 3,000. So we've got to take a jump from whatever we're doing now, multiple, 20, 50x. And when I look about that as how many thousands, you might need to convert like 10,000 houses a day over. Like that's a lot of momentum. That's really difficult to do. And it's difficult. You need to actually like hire contractors and get people in there to like with scanners, and like it's real stuff that has to be done, that the government can't necessarily do that for us. Like the government can help it along, but we're the ones who have to like make sure our house gets scheduled, that we've got like the local electrician is coming in. Like we're the ones who are actually going to have to do it, all the people who live in the houses and work in the buildings. And so I find the actual, like when you actually break that down into a path of how to get from here to there, that then is a very overwhelmingly difficult thing to do. And I think everybody in the industry and in the movement who cares about climate change needs to get really, really serious about mapping that path, like the snakes and ladders of A to B, of house by house by house by house, and that's really where my current fascination is now, of like, how do we make that happen? How do we get like 100 people a day signing on for this and make it happen fast and make sure everybody's motivated and coordinate this vast, re-engineering of society? I just don't think anybody, unless you're somebody who really works in it, really gets the complexity that's in front of us.
Yes, there's just no urgency, is there? And there's this massive on your TED. I'm sorry, I keep referring back to your TED talk, but you show this big rock that's in our way that we've got to move. You like it? I keep referring back to that, don't you?
I just forgot about the rock. I forgot about it.
But there's a massive rock for us to move, isn't there? Regarding what needs to be done and the deadlines and the timescales to get to there and what's got to be done. The amount of resource that's got to go into that is unbelievable, I think.
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, you bring up this rock metaphor, the boulder that I had in my TED talk, was that, I feel like the whole climate change and energy space tends to sort of fall into two categories, which is people that look at government policy, which is we need to change the building codes and the planning codes. And those things do happen to be very conservative and quite slow. You rarely, if ever, have seen something extremely bold, happen with that. And then you've got the kind of individual change world, which is switch your lights off, ride your bike more. Generally, the conversation is in these two realms. But there's another conversation that I really want to spark and get people to take seriously, which is what we really need, which is getting people on board for the vast innovation challenge. That it's not just about getting the government to change a law, which will always be conservative, and it's not just individual actions. You need to set up 10 years of putting everything you have to innovating and pushing something. Like, this is akin to the going to the moon. We don't do it because it's easy. We do it because it's hard. Like getting people to get inspired to do momentous world-changing things that are going to take them 1, 2, or 3 decades. Like if your job is to retool and re-engineer the electricity grid, it's like get to work and have a vision. And so the whole theme of my talk is to let's have big epic visions of what we want to achieve. Yeah. Like a completely clean electricity grid, fully clean, not net zero, but fully clean. Like that's our vision. Let's get excited about this vision. Let's treat it like going to the moon. People are trying to go to Mars. Who cares about Mars? Figure out how to get the evening electricity clean. I mean, that's an enormous engineering goal to achieve. And everyone who works in energy, who works in utilities, like, let's get really excited by this, make this our moon landing. And that will give us the energy to not be lackadaisical, but to actually be constantly on the front foot of change, on the front foot of innovation. Because it's going to take like a huge amount of intellectual and just inner soul, emotional resources to achieve this. And we can't do it when we're all just, being like, oh, well, let's just change the energy code. And then, every new building now has insulation. I'm just like, yeah, but what about the 99% of buildings that are already there? We've got to step up the game in a big way. But step up the game in a way that's innovation led, that's excitement led, that's like, let's treat it like it's an amazing chess game led, rather than like, oh, climate change is going to ruin us. This kind of like dreary,
the doom and gloom. Like, let's get rid of the doom.
Yeah, like, let's just do it so we don't die. Do it for the coral. I think you should do it because it's fun. I mean, I think re-engineering the entire grid is really exciting.
I do, and let's get on the eco-utopia journey, as you say. That's what I like. Some of the words you've used around this, you've really done some great homework regarding making this exciting, what we're doing. And, having vision and creativity. And you talked about having a dream. This is what you're talking about now, isn't it? Having that dream to have clean grid.
Yeah, and I honestly think if you were even just like a super conservative, like you got a mechanical or an electrical engineering degree, sorry, I don't mean to call people conservative, but you're just like a regular person,
all the way through this, you've picked on me. You've said I haven't been cool because I've had patches on my jacket. Now you're saying, because I'm electrical electronics engineer.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I mean, these are my people too, Paul.
Yes. So my dream, I'm going to tell you about my dream, and my mission is to bring energy experts around the world, holding hands and sharing that knowledge, because we're not at the moment. We've gone through the pandemics, which the world shrunk, which is great because we're all on Zoom. We can all talk to each other. But what I've learned is we all speak different languages, but we all speak the same language about reducing kilowatt hours. And that's been amazing, but we all say it in a different way. And that's my dream, is to bring all these experts together, providing them with more knowledge to drive energy down. That's my dream to complete what we're trying to achieve. I think 2050, it's going to be a tough task for us to get to that place because we've got a lot of training and development to do. But once we get that all done, then I think the tasks that we have ahead of us can be achieved.
And I think that all of these energy people, if they spend a few minutes a day meditating on a vision of what this could be, like having a dream, just be like, and maybe not everybody's as emotionally connected to this as other people are, but imagine what it's like. Imagine the headline of like, I mean, we've already had it in California, 100% clean energy during the day. When I first started this, I thought it hadn't happened yet. And then I realized it had already been happening.
Yeah, it's
clean all the time during the day. Yeah. And I was like, oh, well, I suppose I won't be able to work towards that goal. I've got to get a more challenging one. Imagine what it's like when you were part of the team that got 100% clean energy in the day. And then imagine something really, really advanced, like, like we shaved like 50% of the CO2 off the evening peak. And what about maybe one day in the future will be like, 8 p.m. dinner time, 100% clean energy. We never thought it was possible. We thought we could only do it with gas and coal, but we figured out how to do it with like storage and batteries and wind turbines and ocean power, and all together we patched it together, and we actually made our first evening peak zero CO2. And that you spent 10 years of your life deeply making that happen, and that if you weren't doing it, it might not have happened. We're all playing a critical role in having this, and spend a few minutes every day on that dream, on that vision, put it on the wall, write up what the news headline is going to be, draw a picture of it. So it's like in your face, looking at it all the time, look at the data, like when Energy Lollipop shows you the numbers, you need something that's giving you like a feedback loop of data, and that you're working towards it. And then that dream fires you up. And so the whole journey no longer becomes about like, oh, let's protect the earth, which we want to do, but it's, that can get a bit distant and boring. The thing that really captivates people is when it becomes like your own, it's like your own little machine you're building. Like last night I started working on a puzzle and I got really like into it, and I stayed up till 1 o'clock in the morning finishing the 500-piece puzzle because I was like so into it. I couldn't stop. It's like that sort of energy, like, oh, it's my machine, I'm building it, I'm on this mission to achieve this goal, which is like, zero CO2, and this is fun, and I'm totally sucked into it, and I can't stop. And you just like have that like super amount of energy to get there. I mean, that's what I'm trying to like hatch open in people, is that kind of like obsessive, masterful, problem solving energy, which is what my TED Talk was about. And that's kind of my mission, to try and unleash that in people. And if that can be unleashed in the energy industry, they've got to become really synchronized with that dream, with that goal.
So I think that is happening now. So I'm part of the clean energy revolution. There's about 150 of us around the world we started off on a WhatsApp group. We've now been sort of migrated to Discord. We've now got a non-profit set up. I'm actually on the board. I'm the vice chairman. And we're made up of 3 groups of people. So we're made up of the generation and supply for solar, wind, batteries, energy management, which is my sector, that's my area of focus. And then we've got the environmentalists, growing trees and focusing on the cyclic economy and all those areas. So those 3-pronged approaches, we've all got this dream. and we're all driving it. We're all driving it through LinkedIn, through our messages and our knowledge that we're giving back to the industry. I don't know if you've ever come across that at all.
What you mean, your group in particular,
or the
overall
Clean Energy
group?
Revolution group?
No, I haven't seen it, but I would love to. I'll join. I'd like to see
we're
it.
going to invite. You're going to get an invite after this, I'm sure. So, Katie, it's really great hearing your story and what you're driving with Lollipop. I'm really intrigued where that goes. But is there anything you can give back to our industry, our listeners today, regarding yourself? What can you give back today to them?
Well, what I feel is really, really missing from energy and climate change, which is just overall theory that I'm working on with Energy Lollipop, which is just a couple of basic principles of making change happen faster, which is we need real-time feedback loops of data, not kilowatts, CO2. It needs to be the CO2, not the kilowatts, because not every kilowatt is equal. So where is the infrastructure for the real-time feedback loops? Like, we don't have it in our homes because the smart meters don't send it to us, right? We don't have it for a neighborhood. Like, I can't get one for my city. I can get it for all of California, but very rarely. We need real-time data, number one, for the state, at a city, and an individual property level. And the other thing, it needs to be real-time, and it needs to be geographically granular. We're really missing out on this. There's a whole part of behavioral influence that's missing out, which is groups and neighborhoods. So I live in a city called Mountain View. It's where Google's headquarters are. We don't have our CO2 emissions from our electricity grid for Mountain View. We don't have it in real time. I think you might be able to get it from the electricity company maybe once a quarter. It's really, really terrible. So in terms of us working together as a city to get our number down, like for where we live, we don't have that data. So we need real time. It needs to be geographically granular. And then it needs to be shown to people out there publicly everywhere. It needs to be like on the wall. It needs to be like in the on the street. It needs to be in the town square. It needs to be in the libraries. It needs to be everywhere so people can see it. We can see the weather. We can see the stock market everywhere. Why can't we see the CO2 emissions everywhere? Right. And then the third thing is it needs to be in color. So color is the easiest way to communicate. Red is good, orange, green. Red is bad, orange is moderate, green is and these are just really basic behavioral nudges techniques. And I honestly think that we can get pretty close to that 50% reduction that people are able to have through their own behavior just through building that infrastructure. That needs to be spread, whether I do it with Energy Lollipop or someone else does it. Everybody needs to be using these techniques of real-time data, doing it in CO2, not kilowatt hours, putting it in your face, in your space, so you're seeing it, and using color. That's what I think that's my strategy for trying to save the world.
And I think it's amazing because you cannot manage what you don't measure. If we're not measuring it, we can't manage it, can we? That's my biggest saying regarding energy management and energy. And that philosophy goes through everything we do in our lives.
Yeah, totally. My whole book is about how when you show people the data in a certain way, it just changes stuff by itself. Like, you honestly don't even need to do anything. You just need to show the numbers. As long as you show them in the right way, it'll do half the work for you. Just that one thing.
Yeah.
So why aren't we building that? Why aren't we building that infrastructure out?
I totally agree with you. So, Kelly, it's been lovely meeting you. I'm really pleased that you've come on to be interviewed. I'm very proud and privileged to have you as a guest today. Really amazed. So thank you very much for joining us. You're doing an awesome thing regarding what you're sharing across the social media. Your TED Talk was awesome. Really enjoyed it. I think I've watched it twice now. I'm going to watch it again because listening to your passion about what you're doing, it's amazing. So thank you very much for coming. And please, you and your family, be safe.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for our special guest today. And thank you for our sponsors, B2B Energy, which can be found at b2benergy.co.uk, and Clean Energy Revolution, which can also be found either through various different social media networks. Type in #CleanEnergyRevolution. That leaves me with one more thing to say. Be safe.